One of the big advantages of having a bowsprit, particularly if it's set up to have an anchor roller, is of course you've got somewhere for the anchor chain to go down without it interfering with that nice plumb bow. There's nothing particularly unusual in that. Obviously we've seen that on other Oyster models and other models in general. But nicely put together, I like that area. I also like the fact that the anchor locker here, if I can open it, is a dedicated anchor locker and a really deep one as well. That stainless steel chain in there and a hose ready to hose off the dirt. That's rather nice. Also got a good sail locker up front. This is one of my soapbox subjects. It looks pretty full. That's because it is. It's got a big asymmetric kite in there, but the great thing is it's a nice big hatch. It's a very deep locker and you can launch and retrieve the kite in and out of here as we did earlier in the day, and that makes life so much easier. Anybody who's tried to lug their kite from the aft locker from the lazarette up front knows that actually it becomes a bit of a turn off really to actually hoisting the kite, but when it's here, drop it in, clip the halyard on, take it out, dead easy. Like that a lot. As is now become, I guess, the norm, the foredeck is flush. There's no fittings at the prow that's standing up. The hatches are all flush with the deck. It's really nice and clean and tidy. What there is though, you'll see, is some attachments here for some dorades. So you basically undo these for the dorades, and then these clips here are actually for the stainless steel guards that go over the top of the dorades. Going back on this side of the boat, because this has got a little bit more to show you. Halyard winch here. This is an electric halyard winch. This is an option on this boat, but I think it's an option well worth having, because if you are going to be hoisting the kite from that locker up there, what simpler way to do it than take the kite halyard, clip it on, come back here, foot on the button, easy as you like. Jib sheet tracks here. Well, of course, we're now seeing more and more boats nowadays with full width chain plate base right out to the gunnels. These are actually composite chain plates, so they don't leak, is one of the big advantages. Full width chain plate base, but of course that means that you can't bring a big overlapping headsail all the way back down the side of the boat, which is a good thing, to be honest, because they're hard work and you end up with a jib sheet flailing around at the back end and getting in everybody's way. Boats have become more sprightly in their performance as well, so you don't need such big overlapping sails, certainly not for going upwind. As a result, the jib tracks are forward up here. You'll see another track just out on the gunnel, and one of the interesting options that Oyster offer is a blue water reaching package, where what you do is you take off the jib that you've got on there, the normal one that comes back, the 105% overlap jib, and put a high clue reacher there. So if you're doing transocean reaching where you know you're going to be sailing at freer angles, then you actually replace that sail with a high clue reacher, and that sheets outside the shrouds down through that track and then back to the cockpit. Now I haven't used that, but I'm told that actually sail design and shapes nowadays mean that actually by the time you've sheeted it in quite close and it's just about touching the shrouds, you're pretty much going upwind at that point. So it's not as big a compromise as you might think. That's the headsail. When it comes to the mainsail, it's an in-mast furling main. The rig's supplied by Selden, and in fact the headsail and the mainsail as hydraulic furling systems are standard on this boat, and you can sort of see why. Push button operation makes this boat an absolute doddle to handle short-handed. One of the other details I particularly like, it might not look like it's anything special, it's a pole. It's primarily for poling out the headsail when you're going downwind, but what I like using it for as well as that is that if you have an asymmetric kite, you can use the spinnaker pole to just put an extra guy. If you're sailing deep, if you want to sail at sort of 140, 150, 160 degrees true, so quite deep downwind, a great way of doing it is to deploy the pole, just get another line as a guide, clip it onto the tack, run it through the jaw and just crank the pole back 10-20 degrees. It's amazing how deep you can go and how stable the boat feels. I've used it a lot on our own boat, and it's a great thing to have, particularly for downwind stuff. It means that you don't have to jibe. Quite often you don't have to jibe. In an age where there seem to be sophisticated, slick solutions for just about everything, it's good to see that actually sometimes the simplest things are the most effective. Here, the halyard tensioning device for both the furling main and the furling jib is the same. This happens to be the main, and it's just on this track. This is the halyard for the main, and it just loops around there, and you just have a tail. To tension it, have a tail that goes on around here, goes down through a turning block onto the winch to then tension up the halyard, and then when you've got the right tension, then the pin on here just locates in the track and you're done. Once the tension's on, take the tail off, done. Not rocket science, and you'll see it on all kinds of boats, but it's good to see that when a simple solution is all that's required, then that's what's fitted. A feature that we've been seeing more and more on Oysters is how the jib sheet is led back to the cockpit. It's led down through some fairleys on the deck, and then it goes in behind this fairing, in through here, and pops out onto the primary. The key thing is that the sheet is nowhere near the main seating areas. There's none of that flogging sheets around the cockpit and around people's heads, which is all a bit scary. It's all very well controlled and managed here. And talking about that, when you're in this area, look at how close these two winches are. Primary winch here, secondary winch there. The hydraulic controls, primary, secondary, for sheeting it in, plus buttons for furling in and furling out the headsail. It's really, really simple to operate. It's great, it's close to hand, and what I think is particularly clever is that you can easily operate those winches with the power buttons from sitting inside the cockpit, or you can come out here and do the same, or the helmsperson can do it as well. So it's very well, it looks really simple, but it's very well thought out. And as we sailed down here earlier on this morning, there were occasions when we did need to operate it in these different places. And indeed, when I was helming, I was operating the jib and furling and unfurling and the rest of it. And it is very easy to do. So full marks to that. I like that a lot. It makes life a lot easier. And while we're talking about sheeting, I really like the main sheet system. It's very simple. It's a 2-to-1 here over the boom that basically runs through it. It's made off there, runs through a block there, goes around and onto this electric winch here. Really simple system within easy reach of the helm. There's a power button just on the side that's really easy to get to, and it's as easy to sheet in as it is to ease out. And it just makes you feel so much more confident that you can wiggle the boat around when you need to, when there's just yourself on deck. And that's pretty impressive for a 60-footer. But a simple arrangement, I like it a lot. Full marks for that, that's for sure. Right at the top of the list for any blue water cruiser has got to be the provision for stowage. You just can't have too much. On this boat, it's certainly got plenty, that's for sure. The aft lazarette is just cavernous, and plenty of space in there. Already there's diving bottles and fenders, tools, spares, hose, ladders, all kinds of stuff. Plenty of room in there. There's plenty more stowage space elsewhere in the cockpit, and I'll have a look at that in a minute. But the other thing that caught my eye was this, and thought, yeah, this is the gas locker. Well, of course it's the gas locker, except in this case it isn't the gas locker, because this boat has got an electric cooker. So this locker is actually the fuel locker for the outboards. Or maybe the Americans would call it a gas locker. You know what I mean. Elsewhere in the cockpit there are other little handy lockers. One of them's under here. We've just got a locker under the seat at the moment. It's just got the shore cable in there and our anchor ball and a couple of handles for the hydraulic ram. And on the other side it's much the same with the the ability to actually, it's got this cutaway here, which means that you can chuck your main sheet in there when you're finished with it at the end of the day. Bit of a luxury, you might not use it for that, I guess. You might just coil it up and leave it outside, but anyway, it's versatile enough that you can use it for either. Then we've got some other smaller lockers just going forward. A couple under here, under the seating. Again, for sort of small items that you need to get at quickly. You can have it in these shallow little lockers here. There's one here, there's one on that side. Now on both of the pedestals back here, the access to the back of the instruments is really easy as well, just through two quick catches. And there you have it, should you need to get at it. Really easy access, particularly to these switches here, and indeed the chain for the steering. So in this area, the seating area for guests, loads and loads of space, plenty of secure handholds, a good solid table to brace yourself against, close to the drinks cabinet as well. But one thing you may have noticed is that the companionway hatch is just slightly offset to starboard, and the reason for that is to get more access down on the port side and more volume around the galley area. Neat solution. Now, in a world where a lot of boats nowadays have dinghy garages, particularly boats that have got twin rudders, so there's no rudder stock straight in the middle to stop you putting anything in there, you may wonder why the 595 doesn't have a dinghy garage. Well, the answer is quite simple. They decided they wanted that stowage space in the aft lazarettes. I don't blame them for that either, because you can never have too much space to stow stuff. And at the end of the day, putting a dinghy in a dinghy garage is quite a compromise on space, particularly on a boat that is around this size, 60 foot or so. So, davits.
And it's design details like these that help to define what the 595 is all about. Innovative thinking, careful refinements, and often simple solutions, where the bottom line is a boat that's easy and rewarding to handle.